Right, back with you here on the Newsfeed PM, and thanks for staying on. Cape Town has always been divided in terms of the spatial development, and this spatial development is the product of centuries of colonialism and apartheid. Apartheid practices in particular have legalized the eviction and relocation of black and colored people from their homes in Cape Town's world-famous city centre, beneath the Table Mountain to the dusty outskirts of the city. The DOCU-film Mother City opens with a disruption of an address by Helen Zille, then the Premier of the Western Cape. The activists are protesting the sale of the old Tafelberg school site in Sea Point to private developers. For more on this film, we're joined now by Nkosinathi Swartbooi, Mother City protagonist and coordinator of Movement for Care, as well as Miki, the director for this particular docu-series, The Mother City. Good to have you both, and thank you very much for coming on this afternoon. Nkosinathi, let's begin with you. Let's talk really about this concerted effort, or maybe even, if you like, a campaign that has resulted in the city particularly being exclusively and zealously guarded, locking out the poor who work in the city. Give us the backstory to that.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to your listeners. I think the story is one that goes back to centuries of colonialism. After that, coming the apartheid system, which was governing our country, and Cape Town being the door for both of those eras. Colonialism in South Africa as well as apartheid in South Africa as well. Well, we might be hoping that Cape Town today may have a different feeling and may look differently, but Cape Town still looks and feels like an apartheid city, and where mostly black and colored people, people's lives are not are the same as those who are living in the leafy suburbs in Cape Town. Cape Town is well maintained in the city center of Cape Town, but is not maintained and looked after on the urban peripheries, where the majority who are non-whites are staying. And this, Tafelberg site was actually a site that opens up this conversation around undoing the legacies of colonialism and apartheid in our city, by actually the Premier herself in 2011 announcing between 2011 and 2016 that the site was going to be used for affordable housing to accommodate the working class people, such as your domestic workers, security guards, and so on, who have existed in places like Sea Point for decades without being acknowledged by the city in terms of having an accommodation plan, in terms of where those comrades will actually be staying. And we then rallied around the site to say we appreciate and welcome the resolution by the then Premier Helen Zille to use the site for affordable housing. But something happens in 2016 where she decides to sell the site for 135 million to a private buyer. And that's where the movement started to say we need to undo the legacies of apartheid, and we must start in areas where those were secured for purely whites only at the time during apartheid. And Sea Point is a perfect example of how the apartheid special legacy still lives on and is being perpetuated by the current government of the Democratic Alliance in Cape Town. And we have been trying to get the matter to we took the matter to court to actually say the sale was unlawful and that we need affordable housing and not this continuation of urban public pieces of land being sold to the private buyer, sometimes giving discounts to those private buyers to get the most well-located pieces of land that could be used for affordable housing. Yeah. The matter now is at the Constitutional Court, and we are waiting to hear the judgment from the ConCourt. But it's important that we note that the provincial government has agreed now that they will build affordable housing in Sea Point at Tafelberg after spending millions of public money, money that could have been used to build affordable housing in the inner city of Cape Town, fighting this legal battle. And we're now waiting to hear what the constitutional courts will judge on this matter.
Now, Miki, you and Pearlie have been following this particular matter for 6 years. What are some of the hard-hitting highlights that you unearthed as you were putting together this docu-film?
Wow. Well, over 6 years, there were a lot of highlights. I think what was the closest to our hearts was the way in which we, over many years, built trust and had access into the actions by the activists. We were very inspired and motivated by their work. But not only that, we also had access to the city council, to conferences, to property conferences. So we really wanted to get a grip, get a deep insight into the machinations behind power, politics, and property, and how those three things connect. I think one of the highlights really happened after we completed filming, when the Constitutional Court heard the case of the Tafelberg site, which Nkosinathi just spoke about earlier. So that was a huge highlight, seeing that go to the Con Court, and also the turn in the language and the position of the Western Cape government. I think we have seen change in this time, and that was actually an intrinsic question for us when we made this film, is how does change happen? And I guess the answer to that is very slowly, but I can definitely see that there has been a shift, and that is, yeah, we're very thankful for that.
How difficult was it for you, Miki, to be continuing with the story while you were filming Nkosinathi, battling with the family tragedy around that period of COVID-19? How were you able to balance the two, or there was no need really, in the sense that they were telling the same story?
Yeah, I mean, the story took a definite turn during COVID-19. We could not have predicted, none of us could have predicted the reality that we were going to be confronted with then, so that was not in the plan for us and for anybody in the world. And so we had to adapt. I mean, that's part of when you're making a documentary film, is you follow the action. And the style that we followed was a non-interventionist. We didn't try and direct. We followed. We just observed and documented. And so when COVID-19 happened, that, of course, took us in a different direction. And as you see in the film, where we were focused on access to housing and in the inner city, with COVID-19 and Nkosinath's work, we were all living in fragmented lives. We were all sort of locked into our own spaces. And I think it underpinned the incredible separation, especially along racial lines, that you see in Cape Town. And so Nkosinathi then diverted his work to Khayelitsha, and things took a very violent turn. And so the film, there's some very traumatic scenes in that time that shocked us. Many of those scenes were actually filmed by the activists themselves. We were in contact the whole time, but we were all locked behind our walls. We were all locked in. And so people would send us material. I was every day in contact with Nkosinathi and with other people in the movement, and they would share what was happening, share their material, and we gathered that and cut it into the film.
Yeah. Nkosinathi, what was happening behind the scenes that would have elevated the campaign to that level of, as Miki put it, becoming a little bit more volatile and maybe violent as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's been series of violence that we experienced throughout the campaign. And some of those are not, because we can't show everything we've done in that film for over 8 years, because Miki and Peli had been filming for about 8 years or so in terms of capturing the work that we do. But what was a turning point, especially during the COVID-19 time, was the fact that many people were locked in at home and could not go outside. The president gave a directive that everyone must remain at home. And many people who were then traveling to go to the city center and work as domestic workers, as waiters, waitresses, could no longer travel and make money for them to be able to pay the rent. They need to pay for their precarious accommodation for those who are renting in backyards. And what ended up is that many people, especially mothers and children, were left stranded on the streets with no alternative to go. It's important also to mention that in South Africa, the Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act actually gives an obligation to the city not to have anyone in South Africa evicted into homelessness. In that case where there's anyone evicted into homelessness, the onus lies with the municipality to provide alternative accommodation. In this sense, the city of Cape Town did not provide that alternative accommodation. It still doesn't for many evictees who are currently in court and evicted now. And people saw pieces of land that were vacant with plans known to the government, but not known to the people. Because they were going to be arrested if they continue to stay on the streets, they ended up erecting or putting up their homes, their shacks in those pieces of land. And that's how the occupation started during 2019. The response from the municipality was not even to come and hear or listen to who these people are. They responded with a heavy army of the law enforcement program that we see in Cape Town, that those people came and demolished people's homes illegally because they did not have a court order. For any eviction to be lawful in South Africa, there needs to be a court order that authorizes it. But the city of Cape Town, under Dan Plato and Swartbooi, who was the then MMC of housing in Cape Town, they evicted hundreds of people into homelessness. People's homes were demolished. Every day, we would wake up with my colleagues to go and defend an eviction that's being done by the city of Cape Town, using the state's resources to actually inflict violence and police black bodies. And one of the things that we highlighted there was the violence to which these evictions took place, that there's so much violence and so much in consideration of the young children that are exposed to these things, women and elderly people living with disabilities that are often left with the trauma of an eviction, and the city had no plan to actually intervene and ensure that everyone had a home during that time. And so the violence comes there, but that violence was not starting at that point. There had been numerous waves of violence that we have faced as activists in Cape Town, because any sort of progressive protest or actions that are being done in Cape Town, they are met with a heavy arm of law enforcement by the city of Cape Town.
Nkosinathi, are there some positive? I believe there's an episode, for example, that shows the work of the Reclaim the City campaign in Barcelona, which in collaboration with the mayor then, who was really sympathetic to the cause, would have had some positive outcomes.
Yes, I mean, Ada Colau is one of the mayors, or former mayors, that we look up to, because she was a mayor and no longer is a mayor now of Barcelona. One of the most progressive mayors to have in this world. She herself had been evicted into homelessness in 2008 when there was a finance crisis, and they organized themselves under the La Paz movement, which then, opened up a question of saying we organize movements, but those movements are met with a stumbling block because we don't have progressive politicians within the state, and she contested the election in that regard. To actually respond to the housing crisis. And what she did there was to actually put together plans in place to accommodate people and to ensure that the private sector doesn't commodify homes of people that actually result in many residents of the city. Like we've seen in Cape Town, Helen Zille, there are people who are staying in Gimpy Street who are evicted into what is called Blikkiesdorp now. She was the mayor at the time when those people were brought there. Yeah. It was built to be a temporary structure with shacks there. That's the legacy that we have of Helen Zille, who now wants to be the mayor of Johannesburg, claiming that Cape Town is a world-class city. Well, it is for some people who are not dark-skinned like myself.
Yeah. Miki, I mean, from a filmmaker point of view, if I watch this docu-film, will I get a sense that Cape Town is deserving of the title Mother City?
So I think we use the title ironically because we're questioning what's the duty of care of a city to its citizens. And although we cannot deny that Cape Town is a beautiful city and many parts of the city are very well functioning, this mother is not kind to all its children. And so, yes, we do use the title ironically. It's an invitation. It's an invitation for us as citizens of Cape Town, as citizens of this mother city, to be better, to be citizens of care for all the people that live in the city.
Appreciate your time both, and thank you very much for coming on. That's Swartbooi as well as Miki Hayes. She's a journalist and a director of this particular film, as well, of course, as the protagonist of the film Mother City.